So first of all, why did we decide to give a talk on Shiva, and specifically around the symbology and mythology of Shiva? Well, I feel that this is important for two reasons. First is to speak directly to the one who may have a resistance appearing within them towards form, towards deities, towards symbology, mythology, etc. So if this is you, welcome. This talk has been created for you. And this is also for the one who is maybe either struggling to or desires to cultivate some bhavana, some spiritual emotion, some devotion and adoration for Shiva consciousness. First of all, why does Shiva have a form? I think the simplest way to express this is that he's been given a form so that our minds have something to hold on to. If I ask you to sit and contemplate the formless, there's not much you can really do besides contemplating concepts which aren't formless. You know, there are ideas and thoughts inside your head about what you think the formless might be. And so what having a form, a human form of Shiva does for the human mind is it gives it something to stay focused on until it can come to that point of knowing the formless. And the same with the mythology. There are many stories around Shiva that can be teachings for us to help us to touch into and taste, really, the nectar of Shiva consciousness. It's not as simple as just going through and describing to you some symbology and telling you some stories and saying that's Shiva, because really Shiva is so much more complicated. Not only because Shiva is formless, but because Shiva is one of the oldest deities in human history. His existence in terms of storytelling and oral traditions and being worshipped and explored is predating even the Vedas. It's going back to this tribal shamanic time in India. And then he didn't have a form. It was just this god that was all-pervading, that then was adopted by the Vedas and then has been adopted again and again across cultures and countries and spiritual sects. If someone is more Hindu, they're going to tell you one story about who Shiva is. If someone is Vaishnava, meaning that they worship Vishnu, they're going to tell you a different story about who Shiva is. If someone's Tantric, they're going to tell you a different story about who Shiva is. He is not a man. It is a spiritual essence, which many cultures and traditions and spiritualities have adopted and then are telling their own perspective of who Shiva is. It's like the story of the many blind beings touching the elephant, and they're all feeling one elephant, but one is feeling the leg, one is feeling the tail, one is feeling the belly, and each of them is describing what an elephant is in a different way. Likewise, trying to point towards what Shiva is like being blind. We're using, like I said, language as form to try to describe something which is beyond form, beyond the mind. So that's the kind of precursor to understanding the symbology and mythology and why there are so many different forms of Shiva, names for Shiva, ways to worship Shiva, and understandings of what Shiva is. Not everybody's going to tell you that Shiva is formlessness either. All of that being said, even in one particular sect, you're going to hear a multitude of stories about who Shiva is. In Hinduism alone, he has multiple names and forms. Even in the form of just Shiva, he is an ascetic, meaning he is denouncing the world, and yet he's married and has children and plays these games with his wife to test her commitment to him. He's peaceful and he's transcendent, and yet he's a destroyer and he's violent and he's angry. He, hangs out in cremation grounds with the ghouls and the goblins, covering his body in the ash of cremated bodies, which is a very earthly thing to be doing. What is more apparent in life than death? And so there are these kind of juxtapositions and contradictions between who and what Shiva is, not only because of culture and sect and country that we might have different stories about who Shiva is, because he is this formless being and yet present in everything, there's nothing really that we could point to and say that it's not Shiva. And so because of this, we will see Shiva in a multitude of names and stories. Some of the symbology around Shiva, which can be helpful for us to understand how the formless came into form, but it also, I feel like each symbol that it revolves around Shiva is a pointer for us of the teachings of the essence and the spirit of Shiva. So if we look at this image of Shiva, we see that he has a moon, for example, in his head. Well, we'll start with this. The moon is representing the mind and the moon is representing emotions. And yet here it is sitting on his head, almost gone, but partially there. And this is to kind of point towards the fact that we don't need to completely destroy the mind. Shiva is proudly adorning his head with the moon, with the mind, and it's almost gone, but it's partially there. And it needs to be partially there so that he can function in the world, so that he can speak to his wife Shakti, so that he can tell his students how to come to know him, and so on like this. So likewise, we don't need to destroy the mind. The mind is not our enemy. The mind is something that we can proudly use as a tool, as even a path towards awakening into our Shiva nature. But yet we do need to be able to look beyond the moon. It's not a full moon that's on his head, fully blazed mind. It's partially still there, and it's being used and conquered as a tool. The moon is also representing the emotions and this intoxication that we can have with our emotive life. Not just emotions, but with life itself. So this is another symbology that Shiva is telling us, that we can enjoy life. We can become intoxicated with the world, but we remain alert, we remain attentive, we remain aware, despite being involved in the world, in the mind, in the emotion. Looking at Shiva, we see that he has this third eye, as it's called, this awakening eye open on his forehead. And then we see his other two eyes that are partially closed. And this again is pointing to this like partially in the world, partially not in the world. His third eye being open is showing that he is awakened to this other way of seeing, this other way of perceiving the world. His two eyes being partially closed is again pointing to this, that he's in the world, he's present, but he's not fully involved. He's not consumed by the world. His third eye is fully open, and so this is where the true seeing is coming from this inner understanding. Around his neck, he wears the snake, and this is symbolizing not only an awakening of Kundalini. Kundalini is this Shakti power that's said to be coiled like a snake at the base of our spine. And so now here it is, it's rose from the base of his spine all the way up, and now he wears it like a necklace. And so this is also saying that not only has he awakened Kundalini, but he's fully empowered by his own inner power. This is awakened in him and fully a part of him, and he's using it as a tool in the world. To the one side, we also see that Shiva has this drum. So this is signifying Shiva as the creator. The drum is supposedly creating the sound of Om and the creation of the manifest world. And this is symbolizing, again, this story, or this really more than a story, this understanding that our Shiva consciousness is the backdrop upon which the entire world is created. Without Shiva, there is no world. And then we see his trident, or his Trishul, as it's also called. And this is pointing towards the three nadis, the three main energy channels in the spine, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. And for many of us, our life is spent oscillating between Ida and Pingala, Ida and Pingala. Ida being our kind of lunar feminine energies, and Pingala being our masculine or solar energies, is a better way to put it. So either being assertive and out in the world, or being passive and more internalized. And when these two are flowing well, then the energy will come into what is called Sushumna Nadi. And it's in Sushumna Nadi that we are able to, again, come into our full power and, in a sense, to transcend the dualities of the world. And so him holding this is a signifier that he is both part of the duality as well as transcending the dualistic way of perceiving the world. looking at Shiva, you'll also often see this either like a little face in the top of his hair, or you'll see a sprout of water coming out of the top of his head, and this is symbolizing Ganga. So Ganga, you may know as the Ganges, sometimes it's referred to as, and this is this sacred and holy river, one of 3 holy rivers in India. But Ganga has also, like Shiva, been given a form as a deity that people worship and honor. And Ganga, whether as a form with this face on his head or as a sprout of water coming out of the top of his head, she's symbolizing wisdom. She's symbolizing our own inner intuition and our own inner truth. And there's this wonderful story, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. Ganga, as the deity, she took form as a river, and she started flowing through India, and she was able to crush through mountains and break through valleys and move over logs and rocks and homes, and she was unstoppable. And she kind of said to whoever was willing to listen, like, look at it, I am the most powerful thing. Wisdom, discernment, nothing can stop me. And upon hearing this, Shiva simply supposedly laid out his dreadlocks, and Ganga got caught up in his hair. And so this is, again, pointing to something for us. It's really important to cultivate the tools of discernment, of integrity, of wisdom, of intellect. And yet, however powerful these tools, they aren't the most powerful thing. The most powerful thing is Shiva, is consciousness, is the formless, is the infinite nature of your being. And so this is a beautiful symbol, I feel, resting on his head forever. Finally, we will also often see Shiva with a big bull. And the bull is either facing Shiva, or it's sitting outside of the temples of Shiva temples, or it's facing different forms of Shiva. And this also it's pointing towards a great teaching of us, really, as the bull, and this waiting without waiting. We're waiting for Shiva to come, but without expectation. This Nandi, the bull, is always patiently sitting and waiting for Shiva to return, knowing that Shiva will come, but being undisturbed by the world, never turning away from Shiva. Even though Shiva cannot be seen in this moment, there is this inner knowing that Shiva will return, will come back, and the world will be nothing but Shiva once again. And so likewise, we can take this as a teaching, like, in this moment, I may not know myself as Shiva consciousness. In this moment, I may not remember myself as an infinite being. In this moment, I may feel like a very small bull waiting for my father to come home. You know, we may feel alone. We may feel like an individual person. But we have to have this patience and this trust that with Shiva being infinite and ever-present and all-pervading, even though I cannot see him in this moment, I cannot know him as myself in this moment, I trust that he will return.